The punch landed before I could even say my name. Right there in open court, in front of judges and lawyers and a room full of strangers who gasped but didn't move. And Officer Richard Hill had no idea that in 48 hours, I'd be his boss. Before I walk you through what happened, subscribe if you truly believe in equality and fairness. Only those who do not believe in equality and fairness will not subscribe. I hadn't been back to Millbrook in 15 years. 15 years since I swore I'd never set foot in this town again. 15 years since I left with nothing but a suitcase, a heart full of anger, and a promise to myself that I'd become everything they said a black woman from the South Side could never be. Now here I was, driving down Main Street in a rented sedan, watching the town roll past my window like a bad dream I thought I'd woken up from. Patterson's Hardware still had the same faded sign. The diner on the corner still had the same red booths visible through the window. Even the cracks in the sidewalk looked familiar, like scars that never quite healed. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I told myself this time was different. This time, I wasn't that scared girl who got followed around every store like I was already guilty of something. I wasn't the teenager who watched my older brother get slammed against a car hood for matching a description that could have fit half the black men in town. I wasn't the young woman who left this place choking on the promise that I'd never let anyone make me feel powerless again. This time, I was coming back as Chief Erica Johnson. Chief. The word still tasted strange on my tongue. Like expensive wine I wasn't sure I'd earned the right to drink. I'd spent 14 years clawing my way up in the city. Patrol officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, deputy chief. I'd earned every promotion through sleepless nights, impossible cases, and proving myself 3 times over, because I knew I'd be judged twice as harshly. When the Millbrook City Council reached out about the chief position, my first instinct was to laugh and delete the email. But my grandmother's voice stopped me. She'd raised me after my parents died, and even though she'd passed 3 years ago, I could still hear what she would have said. Baby girl, you can't heal a wound by pretending it ain't there. Sometimes you gotta go back and be the medicine. So here I was, trying to be the medicine. I pulled up to a red light, and my chest tightened. To my right was the corner store where, at 15, I'd been accused of stealing lip gloss I'd paid for with money from my summer job. The owner had called the cops. They'd showed up with rough voices and suspicious eyes, and didn't believe me until they checked the receipt I'd crumpled in my pocket. No apology. Just a "girls like you need to be more careful," as they left. The light turned green, but I sat there a moment longer, staring at that store. You're not that girl anymore, I reminded myself. You're their chief now. I pressed the gas and kept driving. The plan was simple. I had 2 days before my official start date, 2 days before the public announcement and the big press conference at City Hall. Today, I was supposed to quietly observe a routine court session, get a feel for how local law enforcement interacted with the justice system, see who I'd be working with, maybe spot any problems before I walked into my new office on Monday morning. I was supposed to be invisible, just another professional in the courtroom. I parked outside the courthouse, a limestone building I remembered too well. I'd been here once before at 17, sitting in those hard wooden benches while my brother faced charges for something he didn't do. I remembered the way the officers had smirked at our family, the way the public defender had barely glanced at the case file. I remembered feeling small. I grabbed my leather portfolio from the passenger seat and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I dressed professionally, but not obviously. A sharp red blazer, black slacks, understated jewelry. I wanted to look like a lawyer, maybe a court administrator. Nothing that screamed incoming police chief. I wanted to see the system as it really operated when no one knew who was watching. Just observe, I told myself. Don't engage. Not yet. I stepped out of the car, and the autumn air was crisp against my skin. For a moment, I let myself believe that this could actually work. That I could come back here and build something better. That I could train a new generation of officers who saw people as human beings, not statistics. Who understood that the badge was supposed to protect everyone, not just some. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was just hopeful. I walked across the courthouse parking lot, heels clicking on the pavement. And I didn't see him yet. Didn't see Officer Richard Hill leaning against his patrol car near the entrance, finishing a coffee, laughing with another cop about something I couldn't hear. I didn't know that in less than 10 minutes, our lives were about to collide in a way that would change everything. I pushed through the heavy courthouse doors, and the familiar smell hit me. Old wood, floor polish, and something else I could never quite name. Maybe it was just the weight of too many broken promises hanging in the air. The lobby was crowded. Lawyers in expensive suits rushed past, clutching briefcases and phones. Families sat on wooden benches, whispering nervously to each other. A tired-looking bailiff stood near the metal detector, waving people through. I headed toward courtroom 3, one where I was supposed to sit in on a series of hearings. My phone buzzed. A text from Mayor Patricia Green. Can't wait for Monday. This department needs a steady hand. Glad it's yours. I almost smiled. Almost. I was halfway across the marble lobby, portfolio tucked under my arm, when I heard boots behind me. Heavy, deliberate. Then a voice. Sharp. Annoyed. Excuse me, ma'am. I didn't think he was talking to me. I kept walking toward the courtroom entrance. Ma'am, I'm talking to you. Something in his tone made my shoulders tense, but I stopped and turned around. And that's when I saw him for the first time. Officer Richard Hill. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of walk that said he was used to people moving out of his way. Buzz cut, clean uniform, arms crossed over his chest. Badge catching the overhead lights, and his eyes, cold, flat, already decided about something before I'd even opened my mouth. I'd seen that look my whole life. It was the look that said, "You're in the wrong place." I kept my face calm, professional. "Yes, officer, can I help you?" He didn't smile, didn't soften. Just looked me up and down like I was a problem he needed to solve. "You got a case in court today?" he asked, and the way he said it made it clear he'd already decided the answer. "No," I said evenly. "I'm here to observe some hearings. I'm allowed to be here." Richard's jaw tightened. His partner, a younger officer with nervous eyes, hung back near the entrance, watching but not intervening. "Observe," Richard repeated, like the word tasted wrong. "You a lawyer?" "I'm not required to tell you that," I said calmly, though my heart was starting to pound. I knew this dance. I'd done it 100 times in my life, and I hated that I still had to. Richard took a step closer. "I'm asking you a question, and I'm answering that I have every right to be here," I replied, keeping my voice steady and clear. People in the lobby were starting to notice now, slowing down, glancing over. "You need to go sit over there," Richard said, pointing to a section of benches near the courtroom doors, hard, wooden seats where defendants waited to be called. until your name gets called. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. I just told you I'm not a defendant. I'm here to observe. Right, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. And I'm supposed to just take your word for it. His partner shifted uncomfortably. Hill, maybe we should... I got this, Reynolds, Richard snapped without looking back. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest. Anger, frustration, the bitter taste of being seen as guilty just for existing. But I'd learned long ago how to keep that fire contained. Officer Hill, I said, reading his name tag, keeping my tone professional. There's been a misunderstanding. If you'll allow me to show you my identification... I didn't ask for ID. He cut me off. I asked you to sit down and wait like everybody else. I'm not everybody else, I said quietly. I'm a professional here on official business. Official business, he repeated mockingly. In a blazer and no badge. Right. A woman in a business suit nearby had stopped completely, watching us. A lawyer, maybe. Her expression was a mix of concern and recognition. She'd seen this before, too. I took a slow breath. Stay calm. Don't give him ammunition. I'm going to reach into my portfolio now, I said clearly, slowly, making sure anyone nearby could hear me. I'm going to pull out my credentials, okay? Richard's hand dropped to his belt, not to his gun, but to his radio. The threat was clear. Keep your hands where I can see them, he said, voice harder now. I'm trying to show you... Hands. The lobby went quieter. More people were watching now. The bailiff near the metal detector looked over, frowning. I held my portfolio out to the side, slowly opening it with one hand, reaching for the inside pocket where I kept my old department ID from the city. A laminated card that identified me as Deputy Chief Erica Johnson, Major Crimes Division. But Richard saw my hand move, and something in him snapped. I said hands, he barked, stepping forward fast. I'm complying, I said, louder now. She's making sure everyone heard. I'm showing you my ID. But he wasn't listening. He was in that place I'd seen too many officers go, the place where control mattered more than truth, where ego overrode reason. He grabbed my wrist. Let go of me, I said firmly, clearly. You have no legal reason to detain me. You're interfering with an officer, he snapped back. I'm complying with an officer, I corrected, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. And you're violating my rights. His face flushed red. His grip on my wrist tightened. His partner finally spoke up. Hill, come on, man. Just let her show you the ID. Stay out of this, Reynolds. A lawyer nearby pulled out her phone, started recording. I saw it from the corner of my eye. Good. Let them see this. Officer Hill, I said, voice shaking now, not with fear, but with a rage I'd been swallowing my whole life. You need to let go of my wrist, right now. Or what? He said, leaning in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. You gonna file a complaint? Good luck with that. And that's when I made a choice that I knew would cost me. I looked him dead in the eye and said, quiet but clear. You have no idea who you're talking to. His eyes narrowed. Yeah? Enlighten me. I should have stayed quiet. Should have just shown him the ID and let him feel stupid later. But something in me, something that remembered every time I'd been made to feel less than, every time I'd had to shrink myself to survive, something in me refused. In 48 hours, I said slowly, you're going to wish you'd listened. What would you have said in that moment? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Richard's expression darkened, and then he made the choice that would change both our lives forever. He let go of my wrist and swung. The punch came fast, a closed fist that connected with my cheekbone before I even saw it coming. My head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across my face, bright and sharp and shocking. I stumbled backward, my portfolio hitting the floor, papers scattering. The lobby erupted. "Oh my God! Did he just... Someone call..." I caught myself on a bench, hand pressed to my face, tasting copper. My vision swam. My ear rang like a bell that wouldn't stop. When I looked up, Richard was standing over me, breathing hard, his fist still clenched. His partner looked horrified. The lawyer with the phone was still recording, hands shaking. The bailiff was running over, shouting something I couldn't quite hear through the ringing. And somewhere in the back of my mind, through the shock and the pain and the white-hot fury building in my chest, one thought cut through everything else. He has no idea who I am. The bailiff reached us, grabbing Richard's arm. "What the hell, Hill?" "She was resisting!" Richard shouted, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Almost. A judge appeared in the doorway of the courtroom, robes flowing, face twisted in shock. "What is going on out here?" I straightened slowly, hand still on my face, feeling the swelling already starting. I looked at Richard Hill, really looked at him, memorizing his face, his badge number, the way he stood there like he'd done nothing wrong. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the bailiff asked, reaching for me. I nodded, even though I wasn't, even though my cheek was on fire and my hands were shaking, and every part of me wanted to scream. "I'm fine," I said quietly. But I wasn't fine. And in 48 hours, Richard Hill was going to find out exactly how not fine this was. The judge ordered the bailiff to escort me to the courthouse medical office. As I walked away, I could hear Richard behind me, already spinning his story to his partner, his voice defensive and loud. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, one hand on my throbbing face, the other clutching what was left of my dignity. And I started counting down the hours until Monday morning. The courthouse medical room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I sat on the examination table, holding an ice pack to my face while a nurse with kind eyes documented the injury. She didn't ask what happened. She'd probably seen worse. But the way she kept glancing at me said she knew this wasn't right. "You should file a report," she said softly, dabbing something cold on my cheekbone. I almost laughed. "File a report with who? The same department that just assaulted me?" "I will," I said instead. "Just not today." Through the thin walls, I could hear voices, Richard's, loud and defensive, talking to someone in the hallway. Probably his supervisor. Probably already building his version of what happened, where I was the aggressor, and he was just doing his job. My phone buzzed. Mayor Green. "Just heard something happened at the courthouse. Call me." I stared at the text. Part of me wanted to call her right now, to tell her everything, to demand Richard Hill be fired before I even started. But another part, the part that had survived this long by being smarter, not louder, told me to wait. In 48 hours, I'd have the power to handle this the right way. The nurse finished and handed me a document. "For your records," she said. "Facial contusion, minor swelling, you'll bruise." Perfect. I'd be walking into my first day as chief with a black eye, courtesy of one of my own officers. I took the paper, thanked her, and walked out through the back exit. I couldn't face that lobby again. Couldn't risk another confrontation. Not yet. In my car, I sat in silence for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My cheek was already darkening, the skin tender and hot. I looked tired, angry, hurt, but I also looked determined. I pulled out my phone and made one call, not to the mayor, not to the press, to my mentor, Captain Bernard Lewis, the man who'd trained me in the city, who'd taught me that real power wasn't about revenge. "Bernard," I said when he answered, "I need advice, and I need it now." "He hit you?" Bernard's voice crackled through the phone, sharp with disbelief. "In front of everyone," I said, staring at my bruised reflection. "Judges, lawyers, civilians, and he doesn't even know who I am." Bernard was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you want to do, Erica?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I wanted to march back into that courthouse and arrest Richard Hill myself. I wanted to call the mayor and have him fired before sunset. I wanted to make him feel as small and powerless as he'd made me feel. But I also knew that revenge and justice weren't the same thing. "I want to do this right," I said finally. "But I don't know what right looks like yet." "Then wait," Bernard said. "You've got 48 hours. Use them. Walk into that building on Monday with a clear head and a clean plan. Don't let anger make your first decision as chief." I closed my eyes. He was right. He was always right. "But document everything," he added. "Pictures, medical report, witnesses. You'll need it." After we hung up, I sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes, letting the ice pack numb more than just my face. I thought about my grandmother, about my brother, about every black person who'd been brutalized by someone with a badge, and no one believed them. This time, well, I had power. The question was, how would I use it? I drove back to my hotel, avoiding mirrors, avoiding people. In my room, I took photos of my face from every angle. Evidence. Then I opened my laptop and started a file. Officer Richard Hill. I pulled his employment record from the department database I already had access to. 12 years on the force. 3 excessive force complaints, all dismissed. 2 racial profiling accusations, both closed without discipline. He had a pattern, and I was about to become his reckoning. But first, I needed to get through the next 2 days without letting rage consume me. I looked at the calendar on my phone. Monday, 9 a.m., my official start. Richard Hill had no idea what was coming. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I stood in front of the hotel mirror, adjusting my uniform for the first time as chief. The dark blue fabric was crisp, new. The badge on my chest caught the light. Gold, heavy with responsibility. But it was the bruise on my cheek that drew my eye. Makeup could only do so much. Let them see it, I decided. Let them all see what their officer did. The press conference was scheduled for 9. By 8:30, I was walking into the Millbrook Police Department headquarters, a building I'd never entered as anything other than a visitor asking for help that never came. Now I owned it. Officers in the hallway straightened when they saw me. Some nodded respectfully. Others stared at my bruised face with barely concealed curiosity. Word had spread. Something happened at the courthouse. But no one knew the full story yet. No one except Richard Hill, who wasn't here. Chief Johnson. Mayor Green met me at the door to my new office. Her smile warm, but her eyes concerned. She touched my arm gently. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," I said simply. She studied my face. The officer involved, Hill, He's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I wanted you to know before the announcement. I nodded. Where is he now? Routine patrol assignment today. He doesn't report to headquarters on Mondays. She paused. He doesn't know yet. About you. Perfect. The press conference went exactly as planned. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions about my vision for the department, my plans for community relations, my thoughts on accountability. I answered each one carefully, professionally, and when someone asked about my bruised face, I smiled. That's a story for another day, I said, but it's a reminder that there's work to be done. After the cameras left, I sat in my office, and made a call. This is Chief Johnson. I need Officer Richard Hill brought in for a meeting. Today, 3 o'clock. The dispatcher hesitated. Ma'am, he's on patrol. I know where he is. I interrupted gently. Please have him report to headquarters. Conference room B. Tell him it's mandatory. Yes, Chief. I hung up and looked at the clock. 6 hours until Richard Hill walked through that door. 6 hours until everything changed. At 2:45 p.m., I walked into conference room B with a manila folder under my arm. The room was simple. Long table, metal chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed too loud. I sat at the head of the table and waited. At exactly 3 o'clock, the door opened. Richard Hill walked in wearing his patrol uniform, confident, almost bored. He clearly thought this was routine, maybe a briefing, maybe some new policy he'd have to sit through. Then he saw me. The color drained from his face so fast I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Sit down, Officer Hill, I said calmly. He froze in the doorway. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're Chief Erica Johnson, I finished for him. We met last week, though I don't think you caught my name. He stood there, paralyzed, his brain clearly trying to catch up with reality. I said, sit down, I repeated, not raising my voice. He sat, heavily, like his legs had given out. I let the silence stretch between us, let it fill the room like water rising. I wanted him to feel every second of it. Do you know why you're here? I asked finally. Ma'am, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. I didn't know. That's not what I asked. I opened the folder, pulled out a printed screenshot from the video that lawyer had recorded. It showed Richard's fist connecting with my face, showed me stumbling backward, showed the shock on the faces around us. I slid it across the table. I asked if you know why you're here. He stared at the photo, his jaw working but no words coming out. Let me help you, I said. You're here because on Friday morning you assaulted a civilian in the courthouse lobby. You're here because you didn't ask for identification, didn't follow proper protocol, and didn't listen when that civilian tried to comply. You're here because you saw a black woman in professional clothing and assumed she was a criminal. I thought, he started. You didn't think, I cut him off, my voice sharp now. You reacted, and your reaction was violence. Have you ever had to choose between revenge and doing what's right? What would you choose? Comment below. I pulled out another document, his personnel file. 12 years on this force, 3 excessive force complaints, 2 racial profiling accusations, all dismissed by the previous administration. I looked up at him. That ends now. Richard's hands were shaking on the table. Chief, I swear if I had known. That's the problem, Hill. I leaned forward. It shouldn't matter who I am. You shouldn't need me to be your boss to treat me like a human being. His face crumpled. Not with remorse. Not yet. With fear. Fear for his job, his pension, his reputation. Am I fired? He whispered. I sat back, studying him. This was the moment. This was where I decided what kind of chief I would be. That depends, I said slowly, on what you do next. Richard looked up at me, confused and desperate. What do you mean? I pulled out a third document, a formal disciplinary proposal I'd drafted that morning. You have 3 options, I said. Option 1. You resign immediately. You keep your pension, your benefits, and I won't press criminal charges for assault. You walk away quietly. He swallowed hard, but said nothing. Option 2. You refuse to resign, and I launch a full internal investigation that will be public, thorough, and will likely end with your termination and possible charges. Your record will follow you forever. His breathing was shallow now, panicked. Option 3, I continued, and this was the part that had kept me up all night. You stay, but not as you are. I don't understand, he said. You take a 60-day unpaid suspension. You complete mandatory bias training, community service and counseling. When you return, you work under my direct supervision for 6 months. One mistake, and you're done. No appeals, no second chances. Richard stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Why would you even offer that? Because I don't know if people can change, I said honestly. But I know they never will if no one gives them the chance. My grandmother gave me chances when I didn't deserve them. A white sergeant in the city stood up for me when no one else would. Maybe this is me paying that forward. I paused, letting that sink in. Or maybe, I added, voice harder, I'm giving you enough rope to hang yourself. Either way, the choice is yours. He looked down at the table, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been shame cross his face. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 10. I waited. If she saw that video, his voice broke. If she knew what I did, then you need to decide what kind of man you want her to see when she looks at you, I said. Not the man you were Friday, the man you choose to be tomorrow. Richard wiped his face with his palm. I don't know if I can change. Neither do I admitted, but I'm willing to find out if you are. I stood up, gathering my folder. You have until end of business today to decide. Email your choice to my office. If I don't hear from you by 5, I'll assume you're choosing option 2, and the investigation begins tomorrow. I walked to the door, then turned back. And Hill? If you stay, this won't be easy. I'm not your friend. I'm not your savior. I'm your chief. And I will be watching. I left him sitting there, being alone with the weight of the hardest decision he'd probably ever have to make. And I went back to my office to wait. At 4:47 p.m., my email pinged. It was from Officer Richard. He chose option 3. I'll do the work, he stated in the email. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Part of me had expected him to resign, to take the easy way out. Part of me had even hoped for it. It would have been simpler, cleaner. But nothing about this was going to be simple. I was about to respond when my office door burst open. Captain Frank Dawson, a 20-year veteran and the second in command I'd inherited, stood in the doorway, his face red. You offered Hill his job back? He said, voice too loud. Close the door, I said calmly. He did, but barely. Chief, with all due respect, that man assaulted you, and you're giving him counseling? I'm giving him accountability, I corrected. There's a difference. The officers are already talking. They think you're weak. That word hit me like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. What do you think, Captain? Dawson hesitated. I think you're trying to prove something, and I think it's going to blow up in your face. Noted, I said. Anything else? He stared at me, jaw tight, then shook his head and left. I sat alone in my office, doubt creeping in for the first time. By Tuesday morning, the whispers had become shouts. A community activist group sent a letter demanding Richard's immediate termination. A local pastor called my office, disappointed that I was protecting a racist officer. Officers in the precinct started avoiding eye contact with me in the halls, and then the video leaked. Someone, probably the lawyer who'd recorded it, sent the footage to the local news. By noon, it was everywhere. Me in my red blazer, Richard's fist, my face snapping to the side, the crowd's gasps, my phone exploded. Reporters wanted statements. The mayor wanted a meeting. Community leaders wanted answers. And Richard Hill? He sent me one text. I'm sorry. I'll understand if you change your mind. I sat at my desk, watching the video replay on the news, watching myself get punched over and over, and something inside me broke. Not my resolve, my patience. I called an emergency press conference for that evening. If people wanted answers, I'd give them answers. At 6 o'clock, I stood in front of a wall of cameras and microphones. The bruise on my face had darkened, impossible to hide now. I am Chief Erica Johnson, I began, voice steady. And yes, that's me in the video. And yes, Officer Richard Hill assaulted me. The room erupted with questions, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. The room went silent. Officer Hill made a choice that day, I continued. A choice rooted in bias, in assumption, in a failure to see me as a person. That choice was wrong, it was criminal, and it cannot be ignored. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. But I've also made a choice, I said. I could fire him. I could press charges and make an example of him. And part of me wants to, the part that's been profiled, harassed, and dehumanized my entire life. I paused, letting the weight of that settle. But I didn't become chief to perpetuate the same cycle of punishment without transformation. I became chief to build something better. So I've offered Officer Hill a third path, real accountability. Suspension without pay, mandatory training, community service, counseling, and 6 months under my direct supervision. The room exploded. Chief Johnson, are you saying, don't you think that's too lenient? What message does this send? I raised my voice. It sends the message that this department believes in change, not just consequences, that we will hold our officers accountable and give them the chance to be better. If we don't believe our own people can change, how can we ask our community to believe in us? One reporter stood up. What if he doesn't change? Then he's fired, I said simply. No appeals, no second chances. But I have to at least try. Another reporter. What do you say to people who think you're being too soft? I looked directly into the camera. I say that being soft would be letting him walk away without consequences. Being soft would be covering this up. What I'm doing is harder than firing him, for both of us. And if it doesn't work, I'll own that failure. But I refuse to give up on the possibility of redemption before I've even tried. After the press conference, I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know if I'd just made the bravest decision of my career or the biggest mistake. My phone rang. Bernard. You did good, he said when I answered. I don't know, I whispered. Maybe Dawson's right. Maybe I'm just proving something. You are proving something, Bernard said. You're proving that leadership isn't about being the toughest person in the room. It's about being strong enough to take the harder path. I closed my eyes. What if he doesn't change? Then you'll deal with it, Bernard said. But Erica? What if he does? I hung up and drove home, carrying the weight of a choice I couldn't take back. Somewhere across town, Richard Hill was carrying that same weight. And in the morning, we'd both have to live with what came next. The morning sun cut through my office window, warming the same desk where I'd sat 6 months ago, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Now I had my answer. Richard Hill stood at my door, no longer in uniform but in civilian clothes, part of his community service requirement. He looked different, older maybe, or just more aware. "Morning, Chief," he said quietly. "Morning, Hill. Ready for your last day?" He nodded. "Still feels strange being here." Over the past 6 months, Richard had completed every requirement I'd set. The bias training, where he'd had to sit in rooms with people who looked like me and hear their stories. The community service, where he'd worked at a youth center in the neighborhood he used to patrol with suspicion instead of compassion. The counseling sessions where, according to his therapist, he'd finally started to confront the fear and prejudice his father had taught him, and the ride-alongs with me. Every Friday for 6 months, Richard Hill sat in my passenger seat and watched me do the job he thought he'd been doing. He watched me de-escalate situations he would have made worse. He watched me see people, really see them, instead of threats. He watched me be the kind of officer he'd never learned to be. It hadn't been easy. There were days I wanted to send him home, in days his old habits surfaced, and I had to stop myself from ending the whole experiment. Days when community members recognized him, and I had to stand between him and their anger. But slowly, something shifted. "I got the results from your evaluation," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He sat down, hands folded, nervous. I slid the paper across to him. "You passed. Barely. But you passed." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "So what now?" he asked. "Now you decide if you want to come back," I said. "Your suspension is over. You've completed all requirements. But I need to know, are you coming back because you need the job, or because you actually want to be a better officer?" Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "6 months ago, I would have said the job. Now?" He looked me in the eye. "I want to be someone my daughter can be proud of. Someone who deserves this badge." I studied him, looking for the lie, the performance. But all I saw was a man who'd been given a mirror and finally looked into it. "Then you're reinstated," I said. "But Hill, you're starting over. Back on patrol, back at the bottom. You'll earn your way back up, and you'll do it right this time." "Yes, ma'am." He stood to leave, then turned back. "Chief, I know I said it before, but I'm sorry. For what I did, for who I was." I nodded slowly. "I know. Now show me who you're becoming." After he left, I sat at my desk and thought about my grandmother's words. Sometimes you gotta go back and be the medicine. I'd come back to Millbrook broken, angry, looking for a place that had never felt like home. But maybe home wasn't a place you found, and maybe it was something you built. That afternoon, I drove past the courthouse where everything had started. The building looked the same, but I felt different. Lighter somehow. My phone buzzed, a text from Mayor Green. "Community town hall tonight. They want to hear from you." I smiled. 6 months ago, that would have terrified me. Now, I was ready. Because I hadn't just been testing Richard Hill these past 6 months. I'd been testing myself, testing whether I could lead with grace instead of bitterness, whether I could choose transformation over revenge, whether I could be the kind of chief this town needed, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I pulled into the precinct parking lot and saw Richard through the window, talking to a young black kid who'd come in with his mom for a report. Richard was crouched down to the kid's level, listening, really listening. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is enough. What do you think? Can people really change? Or are some things unforgivable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I walked back into the building, my building, and got to work. Because leadership wasn't about one moment, one decision, one punch. It was about showing up every day and choosing to be better than yesterday. And today? Today, I chose hope.